welcome. Today we're going to be talking about major gifts and asking in the age of Zoom. Today our speaker is Diane Remen. She has been named a top 25 fundraising consultant by Philanthropy Media in 2016. She is the president of MajorDonors.com and founded MajorDonors.com 11 years ago. It's designed to help small to mid-sized nonprofits with limited resources boost their revenue with an eye toward major gifts. She serves on the board of the Food Project, Fuller Craft Museum, and Cambridge Family and Children's Services. So she has very little time that's not spent doing something nonprofit. I'm going to let her do her own intro in just a minute. I have a few things for CauseVox. So for those of you who are new to CauseVox, we are a digital fundraising platform for nonprofits. We help you raise more with less time and effort. You can use CauseVox to grow giving through a various range of items, whether it's donation forms, campaign pages, pledge donations, event ticketing, or peer-to-peer fundraising. We offer a best-in-class fundraising platform that makes it simple and easy for you to run high-performing fundraising initiatives. As well as when you work with CauseVox, we come alongside you. We have spectacular hands-on support, so you're able to get started in no time. And lastly, our social mission to educate and equip not only lets you get the amazing fundraising education like today, but you also have an amazing library of best practices and resources you can keep using to leverage your digital fundraising. And of course, 9 out of 10 nonprofits suffer with that clunky donation form syndrome, the forms that look outdated and hard to use and are extremely slow. CauseVox helps to modernize those donation form pages so you can convert more donors and increase that gift size through one-time, recurring, and pledge donations. And instead of being boxed into a donation form or dependent on your IT, you can use CauseVox to launch beautiful, specially branded campaign pages that drive those donations. It has opportunities for social media sharing, donation counters, and donation reporting all in one place. And you're able to reach new donors through peer-to-peer fundraising, whether that's your run, walk, race, your annual gala. You're able to plug into any existing fundraising initiative and get going. And of course, we have our opportunity to sell tickets for your event. They're hard enough to manage and organize. We don't want you having to add another page to your event page to take track of. So CauseVox has that opportunity for you as well. Now I want to turn it over to our speaker, and I'm excited to hear about major donors.
Thank you, Abby. Much appreciated. Welcome, everyone. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will get underway. So here we go. As you can see from the language under the header, I'm starting to introduce a way of thinking about fundraising that may or may not coincide with how you think about fundraising, because that is part of today's task, is to see if we can't reframe fundraising a little bit, because it's important that you not only know techniques, but you feel like you're going to be out there doing something rewarding for you and for the donor. Speaking of techniques, today is going to be a deluge of technique. Abby has kindly agreed to send you this PowerPoint, which I will send her at the conclusion of the session. So don't worry about having to write things down. Some of my slides do have a lot of text because I am giving you actual scripting. And with that, off we go into the first technique. There will be an agenda for those of you who like agendas in a little bit. But I wanted to get the first technique underway, and it's a very standard, widely used technique to close the gift. And because we're talking about techniques today, we're going to have to pretend a bit in terms of where we are in the donor conversation. So what we're going to pretend right now is that we have been talking with this donor for, let's say, 30, 40 minutes, be it on Zoom or in person. And we've gone over what their interests are. We've presented some of our funding opportunities. We've gone over the impact of various gifts they can make, which I refer to as the funding plan. We will have pre-decided, hopefully, how much we're going to ask the donor for. And we're at that point where we're ready to make the ask. This is one of the few places I'm going to ask you to actually memorize the how-to, because the language here is designed to, as I put it, go down easily. There's nothing to bump against. And what is that language? If you were going to ask me for a gift of $10,000 to support your nonprofit, it would sound like, so Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support ABC nonprofit? That's it. Again, this is one of the most widely used, tried and true techniques out there. The only variation is for a multi-year ask. We would have predetermined that it makes sense for this donor, maybe they're an experienced donor, we have a sense of their ask comfort point, that this person has enough connection with us that we can ask them for a multi-year gift. And what we want to do is we want to put that smaller annual number first. Why? So that is the first thing that they hear. Then we want to tell them the number of years that we're looking at. For capital campaigns, that's often 5, but for what I'll call sort of programmatic major gifts, that's typically 3. Excuse me. And then we want to do the math. And that sounds like, so Diane, would you consider a gift of $15,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $45,000 to support your nonprofit? Let's go back. This is a little more fun in person, but we'll do it on the webinar because I want you to start to have a chance to practice. This work, as so many things in life, is all about practice. So on the count of 3, let's have you ask me for a gift of $10,000. 1, 2, 3, go. And I can read Abby's lips. So thank you, Abby. Well done. Let's try it again without the prompt up there. So I'll say it again. So Diane, would you consider a gift of $10,000 to support your nonprofit? 1, 2, 3, go. And now, for those of you who learn best and really by writing, and really for everyone, let's put it into chat, right? Let's write it into chat. Ask me for that gift in chat. I'll count on Abby to let me know that people are responding into chat. Into chat, ask me for $10,000. I see a couple. Thank you. There we go. Keep them coming. This is how we learn. Thank you, thank you. Keep them coming. All right. I reference a restricted project down at the end of the slide. If during the donor conversation, it's clear that the donor really wants to fund one aspect, and you're okay with that, you would then ask them for the amount for the restricted project. To finish this section, once you have presented really any kind of ask, What do you want to do? Remain silent. Why? You would be negotiating against yourself. You knew what you were going to ask them for, but they had no idea. And sometimes, it's a very different amount than maybe they had in mind, or how you had connected with them previously, but you've done some donor research and you figured out this made sense, or maybe it's just the next step up for a donor you've been working with. Whatever it is, there's absolutely no reason to keep talking other than you're nervous. And that's why practice is important. It'll help you learn to ask and remain silent, and also for an activity to keep you busy so you don't keep talking, we really suggest observing the donor. See how the donor is reacting to what you just asked them for non-verbally. What is their body language? Look for. That's a nice way to stay occupied while they respond. It doesn't usually take that long before the donor starts to make some at least noises. But very important, because it does not serve you at all to keep on going once you've asked. To give you context of a donor visit, what we have going on the vertical are the number of minutes, so the amount of time we're going to spend in the various sections. And I've outlined down below the kind of donor conversation that does prove successful, which would be, we have some opening chit chat, meeting the how are you. Then we're talking about potentially why the donor made the gift or became involved. It's really learning about the donor and the donor story, and making sure that there's some clarity on what your overall purpose is. Then you might talk about what it is that you're funding now. Hopefully you have no more than 3 priorities. You do not want to give them a confusing deluge of things to fund. 3 is really an ideal and maximum number. You then might go into your funding plan with permission. You can always ask the donor, would it be okay if we talk about the funding now? You might have, here's the goal, here are the number of gifts at the various levels. So you're defining a leadership giving range in that, and you're providing some examples of impact, really important. What does $10,000 do? What does $25,000 do? Like literally, how is that going to move your priorities forward? And then you see this teeny tiny little place, and this is the ask that I know everyone gets very kind of nervous about. But the important point is, in the overall context of the conversation, right? It's this little teeny place. Really, the bulk of the conversation is around getting to know your donor, understanding which of your priorities are of greatest interest to them, and being sure they understand the kind of impact they can have. And now for the agenda. So we just did Ask Technique 1. We're then going to talk a little bit about your role as a fundraiser, as a guide, and what does that mean, and what am I talking about? We're then going to get into setting up the donor visit, a second Ask Technique. Depending on the time, there's some information about, well, what happens when the donor says, let me think about it, which they usually will, or some variation, and concluding the visit. Just so we're on the same page, because I'm not sure, big, small, middle size, who's here, what is a major gift? And it is a gift that falls outside your typical range that arise in response to an e-blast or a direct mail piece. But I do want to sort of caution against confusing what I'll call mid-level donors down here, second to last bullet, from your major donors. So for example, those $500 and $1,000 donors in your organization really may be mid-level donors, because as you'll see, there's a fair amount of work involved in working with major donors, and we want to make sure that the donors do have the financial resources as well as the interest in your work to hopefully make gifts of $2,500, $5,000 and more. So you do certainly want to take good care of all your donors. I'm not suggesting anyone is good, bad, or anything else because they have more money, less money. Money is a tool. But we also do want to make sure we don't kind of land ourselves on $1,000 because we haven't been aspirational enough. We haven't done the donor research. We haven't done what we need to do to really understand what the major donor potential is in our donor base. Penelope Burke has done decades of research, researching directly with donors, surveying donors, in which she finds donors say consistently, decade after decade, is they want three primary things. Sounds simple, right? One, to be part of a big idea or vision that matters to them. Two, to know what you're going to do with their money, which is why I keep talking about impact. And those one and the first half of two, kind of the zone we're in today. And then after they make the gift, that you actually did what you said you were going to do before you asked them for another gift, and that they were thanked promptly and personally. So please note how important being thanked promptly and personally is. Not today's topic, but is the reason the donor retention rates in this country are abysmal, would be put it politely. For those of you who come out of largely grant-funded organizations, I always like to note that there is an abundance of research, including research done with people hooked up to, MRI machines and electrodes so people can understand what's going on in their brains. And without fail, what we know is that individual donors give based on emotion. Now, I'm not here saying your performance and your financials don't matter, but the driver of individual giving is emotion. So we want to be right brain. It's why storytelling is so popular in the nonprofit community, right? Because what is a great way to get to that emotion? It's through storytelling. That said, the nonprofit world has very much focused on making sure that nonprofits know how to tell their stories in compelling ways, which is important. But if you're going to do major gift work, of equal importance is understanding the donor story. So it's not about you expounding on your story endlessly. It's really you having a conversation with the donor and making sure that you are continually learning about what is important to that donor. And then where do you match? Where do you entwine? That is really what major gift work is about. And it's really why I like doing it. And it's really why the frame I propose is that we as fundraisers are guides, one, and actually giving the donor a gift, giving the donor something. When we have a conversation, when we understand the donor and what is important to them, and we give them ways to make a difference, which is the complete reverse of thinking, I am going to take something away from this donor when I ask for a gift, right? I think one of the main reasons that people dread this aspect of fundraising is because they've decided that they're taking things away, that they're engaged in some sort of extraction exercise, like they're the dentist and they're pulling a tooth. Or I wouldn't want to do that either. If I didn't think that I was giving the donor something, I would not want to do this work. And in fact, how I got before you today is that I sat on a board, I got into a capital campaign and went, oh, well, this is great. And I changed careers. because all I did was have these wonderful conversations with donors who cared about what I cared about, and I gave them a chance to act on that financially. And they were happy, and I was happy, and we were all happy. And that's what we're going for. We're not going for pushing and pulling and tugging or anything else. We're simply guiding by understanding our donors well and by giving them places where they might want to have impact and feel great about it. So that's me, and my soapbox are done. Lastly, I want to point out that what do you need to be good at this? And you'll notice from this list, it doesn't say you need to be an extrovert, and it doesn't say you need to be an introvert, and it doesn't need to say you need to be anything other than curious, right? Curious to understand, what is your donor's story? What are they all about? What is important to them? What was their favorite philanthropic gift? Being able to listen to what the donor has to say, and then being persistent. Persistence is key to success. Why is that? Because now we're at this place setting up the visit. And sometimes I ask everyone to put into chat, what do you think the most challenging piece of this whole process is going to be once you've done a couple of visits, once you're used to the ask and having the donor conversation? And what you will quickly learn is that it's here. It's setting up the visit. Once you're comfortable and have done a couple of these, that is the most challenging part of the program. And that is why persistence is key, where you're committed to the organization, to what it does, and you're willing to keep at it. It is largely a numbers and persistence game. And I don't mean game in a flippant sense, but rather in an action sense. Here you see me continuing to suggest a fundraising frame that has languages around donor story, intertwining with your work and presenting opportunities, which is very different from go talk to a donor and ask them for money, right? Very different sounding, feeling, being. So how do we set up a visit with a donor that we know? And actually, I'll do one quickly. If I were setting up a visit with Abby and I knew her, and I knew I was going to set up a visit on Zoom, you can see what I'd say, right? Hi, Abby. How are you? It's Diane from ABC Nonprofit. It's been a while, and I'd love to share what we're up to with you and see what you think. We've had many thoughtful conversations over Zoom lately. How about a Zoom visit on May 3rd at 10 or May 4th at 5? And now I'm quiet and I wait to see what Abby says. So why I bolded this language is that it popped up during COVID, and I thought it was the best way I heard of really making Zoom normative, sound productive, which it is. All the groups I've coached have raised millions of dollars during COVID on Zoom. Life went on. And I just love this sentence. And the other thing from a technique point that I did was suggest 2 dates and 2 times. Someone figured out that although 3 of everything makes sense most of the time, for dates and times, 2 is a good number. And really, even though you're going to have dates and times, I'm holding my hand up as if it were my iPhone. Even though you're going to have dates and times, they're really red herrings. You don't care what dates and times they pick. Your goal is to get the person to the calendar. Once that person is looking at the calendar, success. You can set up the visit for any time that's convenient for the two of you. And whoop, sorry, I think I skipped one. What happens if you don't know the donor? We suggest that no one likes to make a totally cold call, right, into the great sort of unknown. So we advise having the executive director, CEO, or whoever your referral source might be, let the donor know that you're going to be contacting them. And here's the kind of potential last line of such a missive, which shouldn't be very long. We're not telling a huge long story. All we're trying to do is to let the donor know that they're going to hear from you. If you're a board member or if you're chief relational officer, a little sidebar on titles. Russell James, who's done a ton of research in both plan giving and the major gift space, literally researched titles. Donors hate stuff like director of advancement and development director. Fine to use those internally, but suggest that you come up with titles to use with donors that are going to make donors want to talk to you, which might be more relational, like chief relational advisor or some such. That's just sidebar. The point of this piece is to just let the person know by snail mail or email or however you usually communicate with this donor that you will be calling. The nice advantage of this approach, ironically, when you don't know the donor at all, is that when you then call, all you do is say, hi, I'm the board member or I'm the staff member at nonprofit. I'm following up on the email you receive from our CEO, Ted Johnson. And I'd like to suggest that we get together, whatever it is, on Zoom or in person, 2 dates, 2 times. That's it. That's it. Sometimes they won't remember that they got the email, but they'll believe they did and they'll just proceed with you. Other times they may say, can you remind me what this is about? And you have a headline about what it's about that you'd like to share with them what you're up to and see what they think. And if you do need to leave a voicemail, you want to let them know both how to reach you and when you're going to call back. Because I know I really don't pick up my phone for unknown numbers because so much of the time it's spam. So they will have heard it from the initial letter or email they received, but maybe they didn't jot it down. But when you leave a voicemail, and I do suggest you start by phone if you have phone numbers. I know everyone loves to email. Phone is king with major gift work. And leave a voicemail. Here's the deal. The odds of you getting to a person quickly are not high. They were actually, ironically, it was one of the advantages of COVID. People were around answering their phones and they were answering their own phones. But we're back to kind of more typical. You are going to have to keep at it. So there's no solid research on this. What I suggest is series of 3s, mixing the media, meaning calls, texts, emails, waiting, trying again. A new tip that someone suggested that they're researching, and I like the idea, and is around 6 months when the person hasn't responded, send them a content note only, meaning I thought you might be interested in whatever. No visit request, just a nice content piece. See if that doesn't open things up a bit. And if not, keep at it. I would say for up to a year, keep at it. I cannot tell you how many times I myself and my clients have found it's 8 months out, it's 10 months out. You more or less given up. They're like, this person apparently doesn't want to talk to me anymore or at all or whatever. And lo and behold, oh, they emerge. I just had that literally happen with a prospective client. It's kind of the same thing, who was enthusiastic and said, get back in a couple months. And that was way back. And now I'm in month 7. Lo and behold, last week, they answered, oh yeah. And it doesn't mean they don't want to visit with you. And it doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means they were likely busy or they were traveling or they had COVID or who knows what happened to them. So it is truly a keep at it. Keep at it. When you don't get an immediate yes, once you reach the person, so let's pretend, I have Abby, actually, I got her on the phone and she's like, well, like, what is this? And the answer is pretty much, it's important that we know what people like you are thinking and think about what we're doing. Here, I'm showing you both versions, the in-person and Zoom. In-person is, I'm happy to come to your home or office, whichever's most convenient. Zoom, we've had many thoughtful conversations over Zoom lately. If they're pushing back, in the initial call or in the initial few minutes, I didn't say anything about the time frame and don't. But if you're getting pushback, you can just ask for 20 or 30 minutes. And if you were talking about an in-person visit, you can use Zoom as a fallback. How about a Zoom visit? I'm going to skip this because it's dense, but it gives you some replies to specific questions, be it the timing, can you put something in the mail? Are you going to ask me for money, which actually doesn't come up as often as you might think. And you're not going to say yes or no to that. Because I want to get to the next close here. So I leave time for questions. Into chat, I'd like to have you tell me, where would you be or are you the most hesitant to visit with a donor and present the opportunity to make an ask? Is it when you know the donor personally? Is it when you're acquainted with the donor? Or is it when you hardly know the donor? Which of those times are you most hesitant to, quote, make an ask? Let's see. When I know personally, when I hardly know, 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 when I hardly know. Got a lot of hardly knows. Okay, well, we have a solution for you. The clueless close. The clueless close was invented by the Suds Group for Impact.org. I thank them. They have welcomed us all as consultants to share and acknowledge. Why I like this close, I didn't used to teach it, I just found it about 5 years ago, is that it addresses the two places most people are most hesitant to ask for a gift. And that is when you know the donor personally or when you hardly know the donor, right? If you've been acquainted, you've asked for a gift previously, you have an ongoing relationship, but it's the two ends where the challenge is. This close, I have to say, is not accepted by the entire consulting community because it involves a range, but it is done in a very specific context. And before I show it to you, I'm going to do it. And I'll just pretend again, Abby, because you're the one whose face I can see, that we've just met for the first time. And again, there's controversy. Should I ever make an ask? The first time I'm visiting with the donor, well, I'm going to say, if you follow For Impact Group's work and you look at their donor engagement tool, we don't have time today to go into how to have the whole donor conversation, but they give you a way to do that that's very comfortable if you'd like. And so here we are. Again, we're pretending. Abby and I have been talking for 30 to 40 minutes. I've understood why she's interested in our work. I've shared 3 of the areas that we're thinking of funding and asked her which is of greatest interest. And we've talked about that one some more. And I understand why she's particularly interested in it. And we actually then even went over the other 2 areas. I asked Abby for permission to discuss the funding plan. And then I shared with her our goal and the level of gifts and our leadership giving range, which for this example, we'll pretend is $10,000 to $100,000. I asked her if she had any questions. And then I asked her, and this is what I said. So Abby, I am thrilled about how excited you are about the work. I know we're just getting together for the first time today. I'm not sure exactly what to do here, but I certainly want to give you the opportunity to make a difference in this space if you'd like to. As you saw, our leadership giving ranges from $10,000 to $100,000. If you'd like to participate, Abby, where do you see yourself? That's the ask. And from a technique perspective, there are 3 parts to the ask. Before we even get there, though, what do you need? In order to make this ask, you need a case for support that includes, let's say, 3 funding priorities with some impact examples, a goal, and a number of gifts at each level. So it creates a leadership giving range. You need a leadership giving range. That range is going to depend on your donors. This all assumes you've likely done some donor research. You have figured out that Abby, if she's interested, could make a gift that falls in this area. Maybe she's someone who is giving us $50 or $100. And we learned from research, oh, well, she could actually do a whole lot more, but we're not sure where she'd stick herself. So rather than ask her for a specific amount, we're going to give her the leadership giving range. We've asked for permission during the conversation to discuss funding. This is really, we suggest always doing, no matter how well you know the donor, but it's key with a donor that you're just getting to know, because the donor could say, you know, this has been great learning all about you today. I don't think I'm really ready to go to that piece yet. And you're done for the day and you set up your next visit. Doesn't happen that often, but occasionally will. And by asking for permission, the donor's now given you permission to really discuss the money part, right? That's what the funding plan is. And as you did that, you noted the giving range. And then you closed. And here are the 3 pieces of the close. 1, I authentically framed or described the situation, right? I realize you're just learning about us and our plans. We're just meeting. I don't know exactly where to go. You are excited. I want to be sure you have the opportunity. You know, we don't want to go on and on and on. 3 or 5 sentences worth. I've restated the leadership giving range. And then I asked, and I even softened the ask. I say, if you'd like to participate, again, I don't push, I don't tug, I don't pull. As far as I'm concerned, all I'm ever doing is giving the donor the opportunity to do something that'll make them feel great and that's important to them. That's my role in life here. So I softened it a little, but at the end of the day, I asked the question, where do you see yourself? And I was quiet. So Abby knew it was her turn to talk next. So critical to this close is all three parts. If you don't do all three parts, this close can set you off on a journey to nowhere because no one quite knows what's expected or where you are or what you're asking. But if you can practice and get down all three parts, this close is very effective for those two ends. Because imagine now, Abby and I were best buddies. I've known her for years. We're really good friends, right? We get to this point in the conversation and it would sound like this. So Abby, there's nothing more important to me than our friendship. It's been what? I don't know, like 3 decades now. Holy smokes. We've never really talked about the work over here. And I had no idea how interested you were. I don't know exactly where to go. No pressure at all. Again, it's all about our friendship. But if you'd like to make a difference, you could see our leadership giving ranges from 10,000 to 100,000. If you'd like to participate, where do you see yourself? So what I've said is whatever I need to say. So I'm comfortable myself that Abby understands that she doesn't have to make a gift. It's perfectly okay if she doesn't. She'd like to, great. No pressure. I've acknowledged the situation. So that's the two ends of this close, meaning for someone you hardly know or for someone you know well. Here's the when to use the two techniques. Important to note, you cannot use the clueless close for multi-year. Completely would be confusing. It's like we get that first gift in, build the relationship, and from there, you can ask for specific amounts. I in no way want to suggest that you do not use the specific amount close. I would say the specific amount close, tried, true, default, unless there's a reason to go clueless. And you can see that if a donor's already giving you gifts, major gifts, you probably want to continue with a specific ask if you want to make a multi-year ask, or if you're really asking someone to be one of the lead donors in a big program or campaign and you have a specific amount in mind, you want to ask for it. Let's see, where are we? A couple minutes. Okay. I am going to go by the responding to let me think about it. And just want to say, I'm providing you with two techniques that you can check out. What's important is one, you are likely asking this donor for a bit of a stretch gift. That's the idea. Not a large enough gift they're going to fall off their chair and think you're nuts, but a stretch gift based on donor research or their previous giving and or. Likely, they're not going to say yes on the spot. Vast majority of time, they're not, and that's fine. What you want to do, as opposed to just jump to the end, which would be to set up the next time to get together, you want to see if you can learn a little more about where they're at. And that's what these techniques are for. You can inquire if there's something you can do about the timing that makes the gift possible. If they said they want to go talk to my spouse, there's a technique for suggesting that perhaps all three of you should get together so that you understand what that relationship is. If the donor says no, that's fine. You just continue sitting with the donor. So that's what these techniques are for, is to keep the conversation open a little bit, because it's actually been like news likely to this donor about what you've just asked. I do want to take a minute to talk about, quote, when to negotiate or change the amount. Over here on the left is really the important part of this advice, especially if you're new at this. I want to say, trust your donor research, meaning that together, before you went out, you have figured out what this person could do if they were interested and prioritized your work. And so you don't want to mistake reactions like, oh, that's a big number. Wow, that's way more than I was giving, as no's or as invitations to negotiate. They're simply reactions. A lot of the work I do is with smaller nonprofits, and we've done some donor research, and we've learned some of their smaller donors who are giving $50 and $100 could do way more. And so this gift is a much larger ask, or if we're using the clueless close, that leadership giving range is well above where they were. So a lot of the time I'm going to say, whoa, that's way more than I've been giving, or whatever. Your answer is always, that gift will have a big impact or really make a difference here. We're never getting into any personal opinion about a lot, a little, big, small. We are staying away from the numbers, because for a very wealthy donor, an amount that's astronomical to you is not to them. We just don't even want to go there. It's always all about impact. When do you negotiate? Occasionally, and it's usually based on a life circumstance you didn't know about, the donor will clearly say, with their body language, with their voice tone, which is why you really need to listen, fully listen, there is just no way I can possibly do that. There's no way in the world I can possibly afford that. And they'll often keep talking and say something like, we've just had to put Chuck's mother into the nursing home, or, unfortunately, COVID just like killed our business, or whatever it may be. There's often a little story that they'll share. In that case, we don't want to be going back and forth a lot. It would feel disrespectful. You can see if there's a timing solution, meaning, is there something we can do with the timing? If it feels like they were really, their business just totally crashed, you can go right to number 3, which is, so tell me, Abby, what would be possible for you right now? I know you'd like to support this. And Abby may say, I can keep doing what I was doing, or she'll say whatever she says, and you will say thank you, and so be it. But that's not going to happen that often. Not going to happen that often. The important point is to not start bringing numbers down because of reaction. And finally, before I get to questions, one of the most common calls I get, even though I always show this slide, is, I can't get John to set up a time with me. We had a great visit. He seemed really interested. I'm like, did you set up a time at the visit? No. You want to chase? You enjoy chasing after donors? Don't set up a time at the visit. They can even want to give. But if you don't have something on the calendar, you are very likely to chase. Offer to do whatever you did initially. So if you visited with them in person, offer to come back. If you visited with them on Zoom, often to Zoom. In either case, if they go, oh, no, I understand, just set up a quick call, right? Set up a phone time. Let's set up a phone call so we're not playing tag. At your convenience, get a phone call in the calendar. And that is that. So I wanted to leave time for questions. And do we have any questions?
I don't see any in the chat or the Q&A just yet.
Okay, we'll give a moment. I know that was a deluge, a technique deluge. Okay, any general advice on better times of the year for major gift asks? Just curious. That's fine. All questions are good questions. The nice thing about major gifts is that you can ask for them year round. If your major donors like to give at the end of the year, some do because they like figure everything out, they'll tell you. But it is a year-round undertaking until the donor tells you otherwise.
In similar sense, do you have like a time frame before you start an annual campaign that you do outreach to major donors?
Right. So this is the how do you deal with, you have your year-end appeal and your major donors. My answer is I don't worry if for existing major donors, hopefully they're pulled out of the basic appeal and they're dealt with on their own program, which may have a year-end component, but it's specifically for major donors. So they're not getting the give us $50, $100, $150, $200 appeal pulled out. For people you've researched and want to reach out to, I don't worry that much about them getting the appeal. It's fine if they respond to appeals, because it's a whole different thing when you start reaching out to visit with them in person or on Zoom. So I guess my answer is let's pull out the major donors and not send them an appeal that doesn't make sense for them. And for ones that are on your list, I would just keep at trying to reach them, appeals or no appeals. Other questions? Do you try to have a personal visit every year with major donors? Yes. So since we have a few minutes, let me use your question, Ruth, to talk for a minute about stewarding major donors. So you'd want what I'll call a stewardship plan for each of your major donors. We suggest 4 touches during the personal touches, like not the general newsletter, personal touches during the year. They don't have to be exactly quarterly, but they should be spread out. They can be things like just shooting them an email attached to, I don't know, some article or something that you've done that you know would be of specific interest to them. It can be a little thank you video. You are great, not professionally produced. There are a lot of companies now like Thank You, and I think it's called Bongo or something, that yes, there's subscriptions you do have to pay, but if you have a group of major donors, you really do want to use videos. They're very impactful and they're opened. Calls from other folks that they haven't heard from. And yes, you do want to have a visit if you're visiting in person each year to stay in touch if you possibly can, or at least a Zoom visit. And you want to let donors know when you're asking and when you're not. So you don't want the in-person visit to always be an ask. It's like every time they see you, you're asking. You don't want to get into. Nice when you can do like a 3-year multi-year gift, let's say, and then in those intermediate years, you just having nice visits. Who should be conducting the donor visits? Okay. The gold standard in larger organizations is like a board ED combo. I would save that for your highest level donors. I'm used to working with smaller nonprofits. I say for expedience sake, once you're comfortable, it's fine to go alone as the board member. Plenty of development staff go on their own. Again, I would use some title that's not development director. For board members, it's sometimes nice to have a staff member with them who can flesh out some information. But that said, we don't want too much talking on our side. We really want the donor doing most of the talking. But ideally, it's nice to have a volunteer, which would be a board member, and a staff person. That is not always possible and would create a gating factor for many organizations. And so that's the answer. The donors with the highest potential, you obviously want to give to the ED, to combine with board, etc. Some of the donors that you're bringing into the fold, they're going to be at the lower level of your sort of major gift program. You can have individual board members who are just getting started or development staff work with. Yeah, an example of titles. So there were, if you look up Russell James, you'll find the article. There was more about what donors don't like than what they did like. I think titles with, relationship guide, advising, like that, so that people feel like you're there doing relationship building. The best advice I ever received to building a working relationship: under promise and over deliver. That's always good advice. Can't argue with that. But here I think it's not so much a promise. It's when you're sharing what you want the donor to fund, you do need to be able to do the work. That's, I guess, the promise in this context, so that you can then report back. And you need to be able to say, well, what if you don't raise all the money you need? Like, what's plan B? Are we going to do a part of the work? Like, what's having answers to those kinds of questions.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you. I think that really helped prep for the major donors part of the CFRE. So that was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody who joined us today. I will make sure that her slides are in the follow-up email along with the replay. And if you guys have questions, I'll make sure her website is there as well, so you can reach out. Thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck.